Hey paisanos, it's me, Buster Green, and this is my daily animation industry podcast, which I do when there's enough news to talk about it. Okay, so it's been a rough week. We've been covering some very doomy, gloomy stories about the death of the Looney Tunes and bouncing back day by day with tiny little victories like Coyote versus Acme maybe coming out. And today I have a great victory story for you guys to cheer you up after what was kind of a rough week. So here's the next chapter in today's ongoing story of David Zaslav, the a-hole among all a-holes. And on Friday, the big a-hole story was that he was trying to sell the Looney Tunes. If you're not caught up on how we got here, just check out all the videos I did this week because it's been a monumental week in terms of news and crazy ground-shaking events. But this time, I'm not going to talk about the Looney Tunes anymore. I'm going to move further, deeper into the collapse of the once great WB empire. A situation that I guess I'm going to call today the crisis on Infinite Zaslavs. And I had some people doubting the authenticity of the story about the Looney Tunes sale I posted yesterday. We got some people saying it's just an unconfirmed rumor, which sure, it might be. I can't deny it might be. But I have been looking for a second source to vet the news, because apparently the lead source behind this news was Schneider, who has a history of jumping to conclusions in the past. But despite that, he's got a reputation for being a little bit of a muckraker, and I want to say about 60% of the time you're going to hear accurate information from him, and 40% of the time you're not. Although when I look at his predictions down by company, it's a little bit more shored up. Now despite that, I'm still overall believing that Zaslav is trying to sell the Looney Tunes, because the story was seconded by Yahoo News, which has more to lose in terms of credibility. If they were to post a false flag story like that, like they could be accused of insider trading. So I want to say Yahoo wouldn't air this story carelessly. Anyway, despite all that, the writing seems to be on the wall that Zaslav is dissolving the Warner Brothers, and my main reason that I believe all this is this news story that we have to talk about today. So yeah, this story all plays out over the course of Friday. While I was editing the other video, while the world was relaxing from a weary work week, while people were heading to theaters to see hopefully Daffy and Porky and not a live-action Disney abomination. But anyway, this story is also the result of Seth Macfarlane and how much of a genius he is and how he spent literally years laying down trap cards. So yeah, on Friday, without much of a whimper and without many tears, TBS, Ted Turner's once crown jewel of his great Turner media empire, was murdered and put down like a dirty dog. Another victim of Zaslav's vindictive arson spree to burn WB to the ground and sell its ashes. Now, this is actually an even bigger loss than it first appears, because the previous AT&T regime had already Frankenstein infused several of Turner's many channels together into the current TBS. See, the current TBS wasn't just the old-fashioned Turner broadcasting station, it was a fusion of that TBS, at least only in name, but a majority of the content on TBS was actually from an action TBS channel that was mostly called throughout time as TNT. Does anyone remember TNT? I remember they used to have a Mortal Kombat TV show I never watched, but I wanted to watch it. TNT was mostly a channel that aired professional wrestling and basketball, and in between they'd air like old Sylvester Stallone action movies. And in the mornings and evenings, the new TBS would also air content from True TV. True TV was originally Ted Turner's 24-hour court channel called Court TV, but eventually they rebranded to be a reality channel called True TV, and eventually TBS absorbed them and would only air them at the start of the day and the middle of the night. So yeah, Zaslav turning off the lights here and essentially ending TBS ends the career of actually decades of different channels with various existence and legacies, so that's a shame if you guys care. Now, with TBS gone, the only final remaining empires of Ted Turner's once great media empire are the confused and spiraling CNN, which struggles to be relevant as it appeals to multiple people who don't actually like it, Cartoon Network and Boomerang's hanging in there, and Turner Classic Movies, which many professional filmmakers are trying very hard to keep afloat because they need that to keep their back royalties coming in. Now that brings us to the main meat of the story and the main mystery we're covering today, the fate of American Dad, and the genius behind-the-scenes protections that its creator Seth Macfarlane put into place to keep American Dad on the air for basically forever. So let's go behind the scenes for a bit. Now, if you've never heard of American Dad, I kind of love this show. I feel like even though The Simpsons and Family Guy are pale imitations of what they started as, their former selves, American Dad has been the odd one out. And it's been strange because as the show has constantly existed, it has literally worked and worked harder and harder, constantly improving itself. It's kind of a miracle show in that I want to say it outshines Family Guy just consistently on the fact that it tries harder to be good, it tries harder to be funny, and it is funny more often than Family Guy is. Like, if I had to make a call, it's like everyone always loved Family Guy, so it got lazy and weak, but American Dad never got the same numbers, and it never did as good, and it was never satisfied with the love it got, so it always tried to work a little harder, punch a little harder, and try a little harder to get those views and stay relevant. And it's the fight beyond that fight, and also Family Guy's initial cancellation, that therefore led American Dad to be one of the most difficult to kill TV shows in America, as David Zaslav would find out on Friday. See, the ridiculous situation where American Dad and Family Guy coexist was actually never supposed to happen. Once upon a time, Fox created Family Guy, and then eventually no one watched it. So after about 3 seasons, Fox initially canceled Family Guy in 2002 due to low ratings. And so Seth and his team went back to the drawing board and decided to create a new show that was almost the same thing, except a little bit different. Which brings us to American Dad, which was always created to be Family Guy's successor. Always supposed to be Family Guy 2.0. Kind of a do-over, and in many ways, a slightly more optimized older brother with a more optimized workflow. Except, then something happened that no one ever expected. The reruns of Family Guy that were banished to Adult Swim played every single night at midnight. And every single night at midnight, stoners would be eating Taco Bell and discover this big funny fat guy named Peter Griffin and fall in love with him. The show finally found an audience that Fox could never give it when they only aired it once a week at some strange time on Sunday. Adult Swim made Family Guy a huge success. DVD sales of the first 3 seasons of Family Guy flew off the shelves in 2003. Interest spiked at an all-time high, and amidst all this, Fox realized that they had made this horrible mistake. Family Guy was the new hotness, and so they spared no prisoners and did everything in their power to bring Family Guy back to life in 2004. Except despite all that, American Dad was already paid for and already still coming along. So a year later, American Dad originally debuts on Fox in 2005. Now, the first couple of seasons of American Dad, they're rough. It struggled to find its voice, and it struggled to not be Family Guy when it was originally created to be Family Guy 2.0, especially in its earlier seasons. Because the show was designed to replace Family Guy and not coexist with it, I would have described the show when it first started as just kind of like a more serious Family Guy with a little bit more complicated plots. But over the years, I want to say it actually evolved and it became a more focused show than Family Guy. See, Family Guy will jump around on numerous weird tangents, especially all throughout an episode, and might have an A plot and a B plot, but American Dad usually gives you just one absurd premise and shows how the different characters in the family deal with it and sticks to it for a whole half hour. Unfortunately, in 2013, about 12 years later, American Dad was ultimately canceled by Fox, who had been slowly bleeding the show dry by cutting its budget for years at this point. Oh, and here's something interesting I just found. Apparently, when it was originally canceled off Fox, the cast and crew had originally planned to do a conclusion movie, apparently mostly about Roger's planet, but I guess they never made it because the show was never actually canceled. Now, 2013 is where Seth Macfarlane painstakingly begins to create the trap that we all saw play out in real time currently. Now, see, this was Seth's second major network cancellation, and this time he wasn't going to take it lying down. He was angry, and he wasn't going to let it ever happen again. So when Seth Macfarlane successfully negotiated to keep American Dad alive and move it to TBS, alongside the move, he created a series of safety nets to ensure its continued existence. These safety nets were put into place to, number 1, protect the show, number 2, protect Seth's monetary investment in the show, and most importantly, number 3, protect the jobs of everyone who's ever worked on the show. Because Seth has always been a champion of workers' rights, and he's famously gone on the record to say that because he grew up as a struggling freelance animator, one of his main focuses is to make sure that his crew is always taken care for and able to live comfortable lives properly. So to make sure that dream came true, he put these safety nets into place, and these safety nets came in the form of various legal deals and contracts that stipulated when American Dad went into syndication and became reruns, the revenue from those reruns would be funneled back to Seth's personal company, Fuzzy Door Productions. And what Seth did that went above and beyond is that he made the safety net deal with numerous interested companies. There was Adult Swim, there was Hulu, there was somehow Fox, even though Fox just canceled the show. There were Disney and a few lesser streaming services that no one gives a shit about, so I won't mention them. Anyway, with all this, American Dad revised on TBS. They really overhauled Klaus's character by making him make less sense, but all the same, the show was better than ever. I think TBS's American Dad run has been like the peak of the show. Now, I'm not talking about American Dad today. I'm talking about Seth Macfarlane fighting David Zaslav. So let's forward ahead to where that actually happens. A few years ago, the safety net actually comes into effect to be used against David Zaslav. In 2022, when Zaslav comes onto the scene in the Warner merger, one of his first moves was to kill TBS. TBS was one of the first stupid items on his agenda of what to destroy, because who the hell watches TBS, right? When's the last time you watched it? I mean, fuck that old thing, that old antique of Ted Turner's ancient Georgian Empire. But ironically, what stopped him in his tracks right there was literally American Dad, backed up by Seth MacFarlane's huge-ass safety net and all the legal red tape attached to it on the syndication deal for the reruns and the various sub-networks who expected to receive those reruns. Once again, showing how big an asshole David Zaslav was, that he wasted no time in canceling so many other adult animated programs like Close Enough, a show that was similar to American Dad, doing great at the time, but no mercy. He also canceled Gary Space, another show that was existing on TBS and then Adult Swim, and that's a separate, incredibly sad story because the guy who created that show just never got a break. I'm sorry, Gary Space, America failed you. And then Zaslav came to American Dad. He came like the Grim Reaper knocking on doors, but Seth MacFarlane was ready for him. When Zaslav came to kill American Dad, the Disney lawyers ran right up to him and said, "Fuck you, Zaslav, you don't get this one." Because of that fucking rerun and because Hulu needed their goddamn reruns, there was a mountain of red tape protecting the existence of American Dad up to this current day. The trap Seth MacFarlane painstakingly created in 2014 finally went into full effect. The old fire extinguisher hanging on the wall you think you're never going to use. Ironically, not only protecting American Dad, but ironically protecting TBS as well. Because as American Dad continued to exist, TBS therefore had to continue to exist to contain it. So yeah, on Friday, as I was sitting here editing this story about Zaslav trying to kill the Looney Tunes, he was at the same time going out of his way to directly try and land a finishing blow on American Dad. And he did successfully evict American Dad and make them homeless because the TBS renewal contract they had has finally expired. And with this move, he's finally shut down the last of TBS's creation studios, and TBS as a channel is effectively dead and can no longer make new shows. It's now switched into zombie mode where it will only play reruns, which really sucks. Like, don't get me wrong, TBS wasn't the best channel, but I have some fond memories of it. Like, I remember 10 years ago when they were doing well, they had a handful of interesting shows that I was willing to watch. They had like Conan Show, they had that one with Daniel Radcliffe that I never got around to watching. But hey, Search Party was great. Did you guys ever see Search Party? Oh, Alia Shawkat, where the heck did you go? Now, yesterday, Zaslav successfully killed TBS. TBS has officially died on paper because the contract where American Dad had to keep making new episodes for TBS finally expired and Zaslav was free to set fire to it. But ironically, TBS will continue to exist still as an empty zombie shell for another 5 years. You know why? Because ironically, Seth MacFarlane again. Ironically, one of the main things that TBS has to stick around for is those goddamn reruns of American Dad. Because Seth further stipulated in his contract that even if American Dad is canceled, they still have to air reruns of the show on TBS for the next 5 years. Which means Seth MacFarlane literally checkmated Zaslav, prevented him from erasing TBS on the grounds that TBS has to stick around till 2030 just to show reruns of fucking American Dad. Masterful play by the maestro Seth MacFarlane. I have never been more proud of him than I am today. So yeah, if you didn't follow the play-by-play here, Seth MacFarlane spent about a decade reinforcing American Dad so his workers would be protected and so it could continue to exist by setting up a variety of legal contracts, legal traps, and safety nets to keep American Dad in production. And then since 2022, when Zaslav came on the scene with his bag of dirty tricks, his dirty tricks have been brick-walled by all of this. Seth was rightfully paranoid after he was canceled by Fox in 2002, and then he turned that paranoia into a shocking defensive wall that checkmated Zaslav at every turn, preventing him from killing TBS until now 2030, adding a whole 5 additional years to its lifespan, singularly just with American Dad being too stubborn and too well protected to die. Now, even as Zaslav has silenced and fired everyone at TBS, he still has to begrudgingly keep the lights on the channel for another 5 years till 2030 to finish out his legal contract with Seth MacFarlane, or else Seth and his Disney lawyers will fucking sue him. Seth got an absolute god-tier win through sheer diligence and hard work to protect his property and protect American Dad from the worst arsonist we've ever seen in Hollywood, Zaslav. Like, it blows me out of my mind to just think about the foresight Seth Macfarlane had to have to casually sit down in 2014 and be like, well, maybe I should just have a contract set up just in case some crazy guy comes along one day and tries to sell the channel and cancel everything. But then again, wouldn't it be better if we had 10 of them? So yeah, he got himself a sweet fucking deal. That just shows that Seth Macfarlane is not someone to trifle with. American Dad was homeless without a network for fucking 4 hours before Seth was able to leverage those safety nets that he had from TBS, Adult Swim, and Hulu to successfully negotiate American Dad from TBS back to Fox. Essentially, yesterday, Fox uncanceled American Dad, bringing it back to animation domination, a crazy full circle move, a master level play by a man who has now had Fox cancel his show twice and bring it back to life twice. God damn, Seth Macfarlane, I want to clap my hands for that. After this video, I think my respect for old Seffy Mac went up like a whole 5 sizes today. Anyway, Seth Macfarlane was a lowly Cartoon Network animator who started off working on Johnny Bravo, but he's become probably one of the shrewdest and coolest businessmen in Hollywood right now, and my heart goes out to him. So that's today's update from the ongoing WB Studios tire fire, where Zaslav is still doing his best to piece by piece destroy Warner Brothers. But at least Seth Macfarlane ruined his Friday, and I hope you ruined his Friday too. You can still ruin his Friday by supporting Ketchup Entertainment and going to see Day the Earth Blew Up, a movie that once again he did everything in his power to bury. And also, I guess, watch American Dad on TBS until 2030. I'm Ian Buster Green. Stick around for some anime news. Also, if you like this video, please support my anime that I made myself with my own animation company. Yeah, it's cool. All right, thanks guys. Later. Good night.